Welcome to Satsunami. Hello everybody and welcome to the 13th episode of Satsunami. I'm Satsunami and today I'm getting a sense of deja vu because I'm joined once again by my very good friend Adam. Hello there.
Hi, good to be back. As much as you try to get rid of me, you never can.
We've got a boomerang friendship, what can I say?
I always come back and smack you in the face.
You do it.
Sometimes the back of the head.
Yeah. It depends which way I'm not looking, you know. It keeps it, as we were saying before the stream, it keeps me on my toes, you know.
On your toes or in the hospital.
Yes. Speaking of nostalgic things. No, joking. So, yeah, as you can see, today we are going to be covering the topic of nostalgia, which I have to admit, so I was saying this to you before the stream, it's quite a well talked about subject in terms of video games, isn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I think we were both saying surprisingly so. You expect some people to talk about it, but there seems to be a kind of wealth of discussion about the topic.
Mm-hmm. And it's just so interesting. So, like, before we go into, give our 2 cents about it, do you want to tell the audience listening at home, what do we mean when we say nostalgic?
So it's that feeling, so nostalgia really relates to, it's really all about feeling. And it's the feelings that, certain... We'll use video games because we're obviously going to talk about video games. But so certain video games gave you, usually when you're younger, in your kind of formative years, those experiences and those feelings that those games gave you and that you hold on to, you internalize, and they're always present. And, certain things like can just remind you of that. And I think the kind of scientific thing is it releases like dopamine, into your body to give you that lovely that good old hit, like good old chemical hit to make you feel good, and you're always in a way kind of craving that, and that's why we look back so fondly on certain things.
No, it's even just the idea of, not even the game itself, but something, I'm kind of looking at the artwork that I used for today's episode, and in it there's like a lot of kind of icons from old games, like from Space Invaders and, Mario and things like that. And it's like, even looking at small symbols like that, it doesn't even have to be the fully fledged, game, it's just like seeing those images and then getting that kind of rush of, nostalgia of the first time you saw them. And it is.
Yeah, it just kind of overwhelms you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it brings a tear to your eye, which thank God we've not... I was going to say, thank God we've not got, like, webcams or anything. we can pretend, that we're crying in the background.
I know, especially good. I wore mascara today. You'd definitely be able to tell.
I know, it would be running. Nostalgic running on something. Yeah. So, yeah, to kind of kick us off, do you want to share any, like, notable nostalgic moments in relation to video games?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I mean, I think over the course of these various Satsunamis, I have sort of revealed my sort of nostalgic tendencies for certain games. Certainly, if you listen to the childhood games one, I wax lyrical for God knows how long about the Medal of Honor series. That is a game series that I do have a heavy nostalgia for. Other games as well, like the original Rome Total War is one that I absolutely adore, and I really that hits a very strong nostalgic nerve for me when I think about that, and like just the hours I devoted to it and how much fun I had and like how much I look forward to playing it. The original Halo, go back to listen to our episode on Halo, how much I love the original Halo, just because of the time when I played it, one of the first proper video games I played, and just it just stuck with me, the feelings. A more recent one, a more modern one for me was Skyrim. How old Skyrim? Skyrim will be 10 years now, I think. 10 years this year.
Yeah, 2011. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when it came out. So that's slightly more recent. So I was 19 when I played that, but still, like, still properly hit me. And I've actually started replaying it again recently, and I'm just all the feels are coming back and everything. I'm like, I'm back in Tamriel, Skyrim, and everything. So those are a couple of games there. I mean, I've picked ones that I think are probably kind of at least well received and well acclaimed. There's a couple of other ones. There's a game called a Fusion Frenzy, which I don't know if you've heard of, or if anybody's ever heard of it. It's on Game Pass now. It was an exclusive for the original Xbox. It's basically like a knockoff Mario Party. But I used to play that when I was quite young, with friends and stuff. And so I've got it's not a great game, and I've not played it in years. And I don't think it'll be good to go back to, but I just have great memories. I'm like, Fusion Frenzy.
Yeah, I'm just writing that down in the background, just adding it to the backlog of many games I need to play.
Maybe I'll convince the sandwich. I think it's a 4-player one, so I can convince the sandwiches to have a go, and then you can be like, Adam, what is this crap? You let this play for how long?
Oh god, that is the worst though. See, when you've got such a nostalgia for a game, and then you tell people about it, you're like, this game was so good, and then they actually play it, and you're just like, oh god, I'm so sorry. It didn't hold up.
I humbly apologise.
I mean, the worst one for me, like, for that was, I think I've brought it up before, but GoldenEye Rogue Agent.
Oh, yeah.
So I remember I'd bought it in one of these, like, second-hand, I think it was one of these second-hand, like, game and DVD shops, and I brought it back for one of my friends to play, and I was really excited to show him, because I loved playing it on the GameCube. I was like, oh, we've got to play it, and basically the story is that you play as a rogue agent who works for the bad guys rather than playing as James Bond. And it's really cool. I really enjoyed it. The only issue is, I remember turning it on for the first time being like, oh, this is going to be so cool. And we put it on, and then, yeah, it was like, yeah, which pixels, James Bond? Like, it was all distorted. It was just a mess. No, it was not a happy night for video games that night.
But that's the funny thing, isn't it, about nostalgia? Like, the most important thing about nostalgia is that feeling. It's not actually if something was good or not, whether it be video games, movies, whatever you're talking about. It doesn't matter if it was actually good or not objectively. It's all about that feeling. So that's what we were talking about. Obviously, you with Rogue Agent, me with that Fusion Frenzy. Like, it's the feelings we associate just override any kind of like quality control issues or anything like that.
See, that was one of the things that when I started doing my streams, I really wanted to. So this is a really weird thing, but I really wanted to share like my childhood games, and yeah, bad idea on my front, because a lot of them don't hold up. Like, as I said, the first game I played was Pokemon. It's changed so much over the course of, like, the last couple of years. What was the other one? Oh, yeah, Simpsons Hit and Run. The less said about that, the better. Where basically I had to rage quit at the very last level because I missed out, like, by a second. And it was like, yeah, no, I'm getting too old for this. What was the other one? Oh, yeah, Destroy All Humans. Similar thing. Where I absolutely raged at the very end. I'm becoming an old man, I'm becoming an old man looking back bitter and being like, oh, these games and these youngsters.
I feel like a lot of the games you like, your favorite like childhood games are like what I associate the Dan Brown books with. It's like they're really compelling, like, and they're really compelling through the kind of beginning and middle, and you keep wanting to play, and then you just get a really unsatisfying ending. I can just get those feelings. I'm like, oh, it reminds me of that.
Yeah, exactly. Have you ever reread, like, kind of slightly off topic, but have you ever reread a Dan Brown book and been like, oh my god. Oh, God.
I don't think I shall either.
Yeah, I can't remember what one, whether it was the Da Vinci Code or what it was, but it was like one of them where just the writing was just, I was just like, yeah, well, let's put this down into the cupboard. Let's not read more about silver foxes and things like that. Let's just lock this cupboard. Much like, the secrets of the church or whatever. Let's just lock this away. Just never talk about this again. It's like, oh my god. But yes, back to video games. That's next week's Satsunami. I'm probably like treading over old ground. I think we both are, because we have like talked in depth, haven't we, about like our childhood games and things. For me, definitely one of the most like vivid memories for me was Pokemon Yellow. That was the very first Pokemon game I ever got. And don't get me wrong, like, some games, like Nintendo games especially, but some games do actually really hold up. It's like because there's like better versions of them. See, when you go back and replay the old Call of Duty games, like Call of Duty, I actually didn't, and this is a weird one, I didn't get into Call of Duty till I was about 15 years old. The reason being that my parents were quite strict about what games I could play. Like, they didn't mind if it was a 15, so long as I was 15 years old. So, like, I had to wait till I was 15 to play Call of Duty 3, and I absolutely loved it. Thought it was really good, and yeah, that's kind of the spiral that got me into like FPS games. But see, going back to those old games, like I think the only exception for old games is probably like Battlefront 2, or even the
Yeah.
old like Battlefront. Like those kind of games really hold up because they're more kind of fun and, you know, arcadey. Whereas like a game that's supposed to be a serious war shooter, like, you know, Call of Duty, like you've already got ones that are mechanically so much better. And again, it's that kind of idea, isn't it, that you're trying to leave it in like a bubble. You know, it's
Well,
like you
yeah.
don't want to bring it to the surface, but then when you do, you realise that maybe it's not. I mean, not always. I mean, I'm not saying like everything nostalgic is terrible.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think it depends. I think it really depends as
mhm.
well. Like, 'cause I totally agree. Like, there's definitely some things you go back to and you're like, oh God, like
Oh
this
yeah.
hasn't held up at all.
Hmm.
But I still like. Again, this is a purely personal, purely subjective thing. So
Hmm.
other opinions are available. But like, I go back to because I a strong love of the early kind of Call of Duty franchise.
Hmm.
So I can still go back and play those, and like I agree, like you're a bit like, oh, some of it's a bit clunky now, and you're like,
Hmm.
damn, I could really do with a sprint button.
Oh yeah.
But like I still really enjoy those games. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of that is a good old heavy dose of nostalgia,
Hmm.
which kind of allows me to see past these sort of mechanical things. But with some, I totally agree with some other things. You're
Hmm.
like, God, it doesn't matter. You could like literally dunk me in a vat of nostalgia here,
Yeah.
and I cannot get past these glaring like
Yeah.
mechanical or performance or graphical issues.
Hmm. I always remember, slightly off topic, but I remember when I can't remember if you were there. It was one of the Comic Cons, like one of the bigger Comic Cons that we went to in the city, and there was this like huge stall. I remember where it was selling like all the old video game, you know, not
Oh yeah,
cartridges, sorry, all the old video game, like the consoles and things.
oh
And
nice.
I remember this like boy that like honestly like maybe 10 to 12 years old, turned round to me randomly, did not know this like lost sassy child at all, and he went, I actually don't know what game thing I should get because that one's £50, but that one's 40. And do you know what he was pointing at? He was
What
pointing
was
at
it?
he was pointing at the Game Boy Advance and the Game Boy SP, and I was like,
God.
oh God, I remember. You weren't even born when these were out.
My God,
I'm like,
you
oh
don't
wow.
know.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God. Like, I didn't have an SP, granted, but I was like, you know the meme, or not the meme, but the scene from I think it's the Chronicles of Narnia. You're the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe,
Yeah,
where it's Aslan who turns around and says, "Don't speak those words, which I was there when they were written." It's like that's how you feel because you're like, my God, I'm old. I mean, another quick tangent. I put a tweet out about this, but I remember going to, again, it was another smaller Comic Con, and I think you were there because I did complain to you about this, where in like one of the side rooms there was like this, and I kid you not, I'm doing air quotes just now, it was a retro gaming room. And this was only a couple of years ago, keep in mind. Like, this was like 2018, 19 maybe. And I kid you not, you walked in and there was like a Nintendo Wii and Xbox 360 like hooked up. And I was like, this isn't retro.
yeah.
I mean, technically, but I was like, no. I was expecting like, I mean, don't get me wrong, they had like the GameCube and you know like the N64 and things, but even still, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's fun. It's funny because even like a GameCube to me, or like a PS2, or like an Xbox, that's not retro to me,
Hmm.
and that's just obviously because
Yeah.
that was like the generation that I got into consoles. So,
Hmm.
but that's not retro. But yeah, like I remember that as well. I don't think I've ever felt as old
Yeah.
as in a single place as I did in that room. I was like, my God,
Hmm.
all the glass cases.
Yeah.
Like,
And you've got like and you've got like the kid in the corner with the like N64 controller upside down and everything. You're like, oh my God, this is just an omni shambles at the highest.
heathen.
Get away from it. It was so weird to see. But that's the thing though, it's kind
Yeah,
of like the ever changing landscape, isn't it, of gaming, where
yeah,
they kind of have to change. So this was something that I saw someone bring up the other day. Kind of inspired me to do this, but it was like the idea that like, see nowadays how kids are playing like, Fortnite and things like that. And we kind of like jokingly, I think you and I kind of go, oh, Fortnite, it's a young man's game.
yeah.
Oh,
That's not for us.
yeah. Whereas, like, to them, like in years to come, that's going to be the retro thing, which is really it is really scary. See, once Fortnite becomes like the retro gaming thing, oh Jesus, that's when we are officially old. I mean, we're already getting old now, but see, when it gets to that stage, we are. Oh God, yeah.
They'll have to be removed from society.
But what you mean, like Logan Run style?
Yeah, pretty much.
I think we've only got a year left, in all honesty.
Oh God, better make it count.
Yeah. Oh God. But yeah, moving on to the cheerier side of nostalgia. One of the funny things that I noticed was that, so a while ago, you and I and our good friend Stephen went through all three of the original Halo games. So, of course, Halo 1 to 3, and technically we got through ODST and Halo 4 as well, didn't we?
Yeah, we actually completed Halo 4.
Yeah. Oh no, we didn't complete Halo ODST, but let's just say
we did. Yes, we did. It's canon, we did it.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, it's in the lore. It's like the forgotten files. Someone's lost the footage. Probably Stephen. Or not. The thing that I found interesting was when I was about 15 years old, and that was a while ago, so don't ask. When I was 15, I played Halo 3 for the first time. So I wasn't really as lucky. Like, I didn't get to grow up playing Halo. And I didn't really go to anyone's house who, like, had an Xbox. So I never got the chance to, like, play it until I was 15. And I really enjoyed, like, Halo 3. Granted, like, I had no idea what was going on. But I was still like, I'm in it for I'm in it for the fun, why not? So I was playing, Halo 3, really enjoying it, and I remember Stephen was in a kind of similar boat. He played Halo 3 first as well when we first streamed it last year, and yeah, it's strange because he had the exact same experience I did, where he played Halo 3 first, then he went back to Halo 1, and then he played Halo 2 with me on stream, and he hated Halo 1. But yeah. I remember when I played it, I didn't think there was too much of a difference. Like, obviously the graphics, you can't help that with these nostalgic games, but other than that, like, I thought the gameplay was very similar.
Yeah, like, it's definitely reminiscent enough. Obviously, they'd made some changes.
Oh, yeah.
But it is reminiscent enough. I think it's partly that thing of being an older game where, like, the difficulty was a lot steeper. Like they throw a lot more at you in Halo, and you're having to, like, you're put into a lot of really difficult fights in very kind of close quarters. So I do think, again, I'm not that I'm speaking for Stephen, but like I do think that the difficulty curve is probably the thing, and I think that's the thing that kind of kills a lot of people's interest in older games if they haven't, if they didn't play them at the time, is that they can be, like, really bloody difficult. But again, I think it's a funny thing because you just don't know how people are going to react to things. And you obviously really enjoyed Halo 3 when you played it the first time. So, like, perhaps there was enough good feeling there, and you're like, oh, I enjoyed this to kind of push through any of the more sort of, trickier bits of the original Halo. That feeling was able to propel you up, but
yeah, I don't know. I feel as if between that and kind of the extra, like, material that was available at the time, like, there was a lot of shows. Like, I know I've talked about the show a lot, but, like, RB and the Chief was one of them.
Oh yeah,
it was like a show that was on constantly. Same with what's the other one? Like, even for Call of Duty, there was Online Gamer as well. Which so kind of just to quickly summarise, RB and the Chief was just basically a guy who had two Halo figures, and he just basically, like, pretended to, that they. It was like an adult version of Toy Story. Pretended they were alive, and just they spent their days playing the Xbox, and they just spent their day playing Halo. And it was the same with the Online Gamer, but the only difference was the Online Gamer was just about a guy who was just a stereotype, like, horrible person, like, but just this guy who played COD all the time, and kind of, like, it was kind of the thing at the time to stereotype, I suppose. Really interesting, but, like, that kind of added to the nostalgia, which sounds a bit weird to say, like, it wasn't enough. Like, I feel kind of bad being like, oh, is it not enough that the game gives you the nostalgic feelings? It's like, no, I need more, damn it, more. Oh god, it's like Little Shop of Horrors all over again. He was like, more.
Feed me.
Exactly. But yeah, it's just that kind of feeling of remembering those kind of, I guess you could say, good days. You know, it's like the days where we had kind of less responsibilities, and you know, we had more time to game and everything, and you know, it was just like a bit of a simpler time, not as stressful at times. You know, obviously except for school and things, and you know, like other than that.
That's the kind of that's the kind of thing about nostalgia as well. Like, I think as human beings, like we hold on to good memories longer than we do bad memories. So you know, even though like, and you're definitely right. We definitely have more time, less responsibilities at a younger age, you know, and we could devote more time to games. Even if we did have responsibilities and things going on at that time that weren't as great, we probably we don't remember them as well as we remember like, oh, like, you know, the good things we did, like whatever they were, playing video games, whatever, like, etc., etc.
Yeah, back in the good old days, you know.
Back in them days.
Yeah, shedding a tear there. So that kind of, speaking of like the good side of nostalgia, that kind of brings us on to like a very nice segue. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Practiced it all day.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the kind of, I suppose, like the duality of nostalgia. We're going to be talking about like the good side of nostalgia, so as we were saying about, you know, bringing back those good memories and things, and as well we're going to dive into probably the less desirable aspects of nostalgia. Yeah, let's kick it off. So do you want to start with what good things come from nostalgia?
Yeah, well, I'll start. I mean, for a start, like, you should do, well, maybe you can't always do, but you should do things that make you feel good. So, you know, I think that's that's like maybe the primary good thing about nostalgia. If it makes you feel good to play something, you know, play a video game or whatever, you know, then you should do it. Because, you know, at the end of the day, like, it's not right to punish yourself or anything, but deny yourself, something like that. So that's like the primary benefit. It's just good for your like well-being, for your mental health or whatever. So definitely, the good thing about, like, I think with a lot of these games and other things and whatever, like, that we get nostalgic about, they happen. A lot of these are associated with times in our life, like childhood, you know, teenage years, times like our formative years where we're growing and we're learning a lot about ourselves and we're kind of developing our own identity, and that's why a lot of these things resonate. You know, that's like, as I said when I was talking about like Medal of Honor and stuff, at the time that I got into the Medal of Honor series, that was a time that my interest in history was really developing, and my interest in, like, you know, the world wars and everything, and that's something that I've carried through with me to this day. And so that's like that's a part of me that, you know, was developing at that time, and I associate with playing Medal of Honor games and other games like, you know, early Call of Duties. So like I look back fondly as that was a development of part of my self identity and my own interests and hobbies. So, you know, like, from that perspective, you know, while maybe perhaps like nostalgia itself isn't the reason, you know, you develop these interests and everything, it's good to remind. It can be a good way to remind yourself and be like, do you know what, this is what I'm passionate about. This is my hobby. This is what I like to do. This is what I'm interested in. And it's, you know, it's important to have interests and hobbies and everything, whether you want to share them with other people or whether you just want to like indulge them yourself. Like, that's fine either way. But so nostalgia is a good way, I think, to remind yourself and be like, you know what, and get to know yourself a bit better, you know, and show yourself some self-love. So I would say, looking at that, I think those are the two main kind of benefits, I would say, of nostalgia.
Because nostalgia is a bit like, and I don't want to oversimplify it, but it is like that kind of comfort blanket when it comes to video games. It's that idea of kind of, and I think I brought this up in our episode about like childhood games, but it's like, for example, this is my gaming confession, so I'm saying it live. I used to be a Sonic fan. I'm sorry, you had to find out this way. I don't. See, I always have a soft spot for, like, see Pokemon and Sonic and games like that. I'll always have, like, a really soft spot for those games, because Sonic is just one of those franchises that has gone down the tube, and, like, I think I ranted about, like, this on our bad video games episode, but honest to goodness, like, it's one of those series that I still remember growing up with. The, like, Sonic Adventure series, I grew up with, you know, Heroes, and even Shadow the Hedgehog. Just a quick reminder, that is the game where they gave a hedgehog a gun to shoot aliens. So you're thinking, what the hell? In fact, I always remember that. Like, I've got a distinct memory, even though the game was bad. Like, before I played it, this is going to sound really strange, but I always remember I was in church with my mum when I was younger, and I remember sitting there and I saw something kind of peek out her bag, and I was like, what is that? And I don't know whether she'd gone out and bought it, and she just forgot to take it out of her bag. But she had got it for, it was either my Christmas or either my birthday or Christmas, but she had actually got that game. So it was like sitting in, and I kept looking in her bag, and I think people were starting to think, why is he going into his mum's bag so much? It's like, because it's a new Sonic the Hedgehog game. It's like, I just remember getting so excited about that. And obviously you play the game and it doesn't like hold up and everything, but the point is, like, it's almost as if, like, these memories, like, whether the game is good or bad, like, it almost feels as if the nostalgia kind of takes that away, if you know what I mean, or at least softens the blow. Like, I remember even on this channel playing a bit of Shadow the Hedgehog. Obviously, not a great game, but at least you can talk about it. Like, that is the thing. Like, even though it's bad, at least it gives you something to kind of talk about, and it's also a good icebreaker as well, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Like, I mean, even saying to someone, like, I always remember at university people saying, oh, I'm playing Pokemon. And, you're like, oh, you're playing Pokemon. I used to love Pokemon when I was growing up. But it's weird because when you're in, like, high school, you're not far enough ahead that it's nostalgic enough. So people still have, like, those kind of games, like, fresh in the memory, and the kind of, that way you get a lot of people who gatekeep what you like and what you don't like. So they're kind of like, oh, you like Pokemon, or you like Call of Duty when Halo's the next best thing, or whatever games.
Yeah.
At the time, I'm trying to think of the popular games when we were growing up. Like the Marios and.
Oh yeah, well certainly Call of Duty was
probably
height, like when we
were yeah, absolutely,
definitely ascending at least.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like it's given it time to. I suppose it's given it time to kind of age like a fine wine, isn't it?
Yeah.
To kind of like mature and then get your opinions and look at it in hindsight. And look back in, as I was saying, like a simpler time where you can kind of like retreat into, those kind of days where you could just play those games. And it gives you like that kind of rush of just like feels, I suppose, to coin a phrase. Yeah, so as I said, it's definitely that comfort blanket, and I do feel it's good as well to kind of, like to unite with friends as well. I feel as if, like, if it's not a good way to, like, be a icebreaker, it's definitely a good way to kind of connect with people. You and me have played, like, a lot of games on, during the lockdown and things online, and mostly it's been like Call of Duty and games like that. Of course, I've also included Stephen, which I feel as if I've gotten to know Stephen a bit better throughout this because of, being able to play like games that we used to like. For anyone wondering, yes, it's Call of Duty. But, it's like games we used to play when we were younger. And then, because I remember at the start of the lockdown, I was kind of thinking, oh, should I buy it? Should I not? Because I think, see, up until that point, it was a while since I'd played like a Call of Duty game.
Yeah.
And then I think you had said you had it and Stephen had it. And then I was like, should I get it? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to get it. I'm going to get Modern Warfare. And I did. And I don't regret it because, those couple of months, they were just like a blast.
Yeah.
Being able to connect with you guys, even though nowadays we obviously can't do that physically because of, restrictions and things. But yeah, it's like going back to those days of, and I think I mentioned this in a past episode, but it's like, do you remember back in the day when you would go to someone's house and you would like play, you would play a 2-player game, but obviously it would be like split screen.
Yeah.
Rather than, online. I don't know, there's something kind of nice about that. There was something personal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know. Oh, yeah, I totally agree. And that's one thing that I'm dead keen. I think I might have mentioned it, at least to you. I think I might mention it to Stephen as well. But like once all this craziness is over, and we can meet up again, I really want to crack out, like, because I have my original Xbox like packed away at the minute in a cupboard. I really want to crack it out and like load up, ideally probably the Time Splitters games again. I get you guys over and just play it. And again, perhaps they don't hold up as well. There's another game that you played on stream. But like just load them up, and again, even if they don't hold up as well now, like I still think it'll be a laugh just to like, just to get you guys over and just play it and have some fun.
Yeah. See, the funny thing about like Time Splitters was like that was another game I got really late into, but because it was like another friend who was like promoting it through his own nostalgia,
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, this is going to sound weird, it's like a nostalgia chain where it's like he played it when he was younger, he promoted it to me because he was nostalgic about this game, and then yeah, he's just got this newfound sense of nostalgia from, so basically, just to kind of quickly explain, it was a friend of mine who told me to buy it in this second-hand video game shop, and I bought it thinking, I don't know if this will be my kind of game, but we like spent the whole night completely tearing through Time Splitters 2, and even though I don't even know if you would include that in the nostalgia bracket, because it was like 6, 7, maybe even 8 years ago. 6 to 8 years ago, maybe. And I still feel kind of nostalgic, because every time I look at the game, I think of, those times I spent in university, kind of just sitting up late, playing those games. And it is weird how, infectious nostalgia can be, if you know. Yeah.
Well, it's like a kind of philosophical question, isn't it? Like how old does it have to be nostalgic? And I don't know if there is a definite answer to that.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have played something last year or watched something last year that you feel nostalgic for. And I guess again it varies different levels. Like, you obviously have really strong nostalgia, and that's probably associated with games you played in your childhood, your teenage years. But you can get like lesser extensive nostalgia, So I think it's one of these things that varies on a scale. But I think as well, that's another good thing about nostalgia is it's a way to get introduced to new things. So it doesn't even so much. I mean, you could obviously introduce people to new things, but as well, like, just by meeting somebody and kind of interacting with their nostalgia, you can get introduced to things that you might not have even bothered to look at before. And I would encourage people to share their. I know sometimes people you can. It's kind of natural sometimes to not want to share everything because you're like, oh, I don't want to open myself up and share. But I think it is maybe not with people you kind of trust and that are like good people and everything. I would encourage people to open up because at the end of the day, as long as you remember that your opinion isn't sacrosanct, it's not like because you like this, everybody else must like this, and no other opinions are available. Like, people are gonna have different opinions, and that's fine. It's okay to have different opinions and stuff as long as you're respectful about it. But and so perhaps in the same way that obviously I have a great fondness and a great love for Halo, but obviously as when Stephen played it, he didn't have that. And we do joke. I think I got a little bit defensive at first about that. I was like, "No, how dare you? You're wrong. You're just wrong." But a bit of reflection, I was like, "Right, okay, I sound like a proper child right now." So just a bit of reflection, you're like, what? But I'm so glad that I shared that, and so perhaps he didn't love it as much as I did, but that's fine. Perhaps share something else. Child didn't, might like it just as much as I do. So it's a good way just to connect. You said this right, just a good way to connect with people.
There is that kind of issue, isn't it, from trying to disconnect your nostalgic self from your objective self when it comes to those games. So, for example, I've seen a lot of Let's Players do for example, let's say Sonic. That's quite an easy punching bag for games. And I mean, it's the same with some other platformers, at the time, where they're just it's low-hanging fruit. It's like what I said about Banjo-Kazooie weeks ago. The first two, oh, great games, perfectly fine. The third one, let's, beat up on it. I mean, it is quite interesting to kind of realise that, or come to that kind of, that sense of enlightenment where you're just like, I should really stop defending. Or not stop defending, but, not be as emotionally invested without kind of realising the flaws of the game. Because, as I said, Sonic is definitely, a low-hanging fruit. And I don't, care if anybody, criticises it, It's like, that's fair enough, because there are faults with it. But see when it's, the wrong faults, when they're like, oh, it's, I hate this game because of this reason, and you're like, whoa, hold on. Or when you see people play, for example, GoldenEye 64, a game that has aged, don't want to say milk, but it was revolutionary for the time.
I think milk is an apt. Milk is an apt description. No offense to GoldenEye, but
GoldenEye was a total. What's the word? Not trailblazer.
I think trailblazer is the right word. It was revolutionary.
Oh yeah, I mean, it was absolutely, at the time, everybody was going nuts for this game. They loved it. But now when you play it, as I said, there's just so many games that just have completely surpassed it. Whereas So here's a question for you, because I heard obviously that you had said about games like Total War, and I think we've both got like a very similar stance on the Total War series, that
Yeah,
the early ones we both really enjoyed,
yeah,
and then when we got to the older ones, we were kind of like, or sorry, the newer ones, we were like, it's not as good, because of all
yeah.
like the micromanaging and things. Would you say like, obviously objectively it's because they're so different, but would you say nostalgia has a part to play in that?
I think so. I mean, I think definitely because I think you can develop a very fixed idea in your
Hmm.
mind and be like, this is the game that I liked,
Hmm.
and I won't brook anything any kind of different any
Yeah.
major sort of
Hmm.
differences to it. And obviously, as you said, like the Total War series went in a different direction. No, it wasn't like a huge, ginormous difference, but it went in a
Hmm.
different direction, and it did become a bit more micromanagey,
Hmm.
which again drove people like me and yourself away from it.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, like maybe more people liked that and disliked it, and that's fair enough. But I definitely think because I had such strong feelings of Rome Total War I'd put it in like one of my top 10 favorite games of all time
Hmm.
because I absolutely loved it and I devoted so many hours to it, and I just think it's a brilliant game. But again, that's the
Hmm.
double. And I know we're not specifically talking about nostalgia, the negatives of it in a minute, but
Hmm.
I'm sure we'll come on to that.
Oh
It
yeah.
is that way if you can develop such a fixed idea of like, this is my cherished
Hmm.
baby, and I don't, it's like this isn't
Yeah.
my child, that kind of thing. So, definitely, I think nostalgia
Yeah.
can really like can really it can put you off from
Mm.
trying new things. And perhaps if I devote some time to the newer Total Wars,
Yeah.
I have bought a couple of them like on when they were on sale, but I've not actually played them. Perhaps if I devote some time to them,
Hmm.
I'll be like, you know what, these are good for what they are.
Hmm. I've actually done the same. I've bought, I think it's Three Kingdoms,
Oh yeah.
and because it's like set in China, and like I've got like a real interest in like Chinese history and things, I'm really excited to kind of try it. But I just know as soon as I try it, I'm probably gonna get the same feeling as when I played Rome 2, which
Mm.
is, oh, this game looks amazing. It's just so, incredible. And then when you actually play it, you're just like, Jesus, Mary, and the baby Joseph, what is going on with this? Like, there's so much
Yeah.
micromanaging, there's so much of this and that. There's just too much going on. And again, it links back to what you were saying there about nostalgia. It's like, I do like that analogy of, that's not my baby. Where's my baby? And it's like, Sega standing there saying, this is Total War, and you're refusing to believe it. You're like, no, 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 this isn't Total War. And it is. It's just, it's a bit of a shame, but I suppose, yeah, that is kind of a detriment of nostalgia, which is something we will come on to. But before we do, is there any other points you think about, like, the good side of nostalgia for video games?
I do think maybe as a kind of like an addendum to what we've been
Hmm.
saying, like obviously some games and some consoles have much more nostalgia attached to them than others.
Oh, yeah.
And so there's a lot bigger fan base, and that's how you do get like some of these games getting remade,
Mm.
remastered, or we're getting now like these kind of the kind of consoles that you get like the SNES Mini came out,
Hmm.
the PlayStation Classic, the Sega Genesis, has that got one now, or is that going
I
to have one?
think it does, yeah.
Yeah, so you get like that. I mean, and that in itself is like there can be a detriment to that as well. But I think a
Mm.
positive of that is it does keep these things alive and does allow people a chance to experience them.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, like I mean, I know they have like released Final Fantasy VII on like taking aside the remake, and they have like released. I think the original one's on Game Pass. But like for some other games, like it's not always easy to like for something like Resident Evil 2, like if you didn't have a PlayStation, like how were you meant to play it? There
Hmm.
wasn't really, as far as I know, there was no. I mean, maybe you can emulate or something, but how are you legally? So
Yeah.
I should say, how would you legally meant to play it?
Hmm.
Being the good people that I'm sure you all are. And so, but with there being a lot of nostalgia attached to it and a lot of like a big fan base behind it, it gave it the impetus for Capcom to remaster it, and that allowed other people, myself included, a chance to experience that game and to really enjoy it. So I think I would say that it's kind of attached to what we've been talking about already, but it does keep these kind of old games and old consoles alive and allows a new audience to discover them.
I mean, like going back to what you were saying there about the companies releasing new versions, or sorry, old consoles, in like a new form. Like on the one hand there is like that danger, like we will get into, that side of it, but there is that danger of like rehashing old ground and things. You're completely right. I do think that it gives like a new generation of like kids and gamers and things the chance to actually go back and play these games, because let's face it, I mean, all the Fortnite kids and everything, they're not going to care about like the older games unless these companies are saying, oh, remember Mario, and things like that, which is kind of weird, because I know I've kind of bashed Nintendo about this before, but for a company that really puts emphasis on nostalgia, they're really bad at it. They're really, really bad at it. Don't get me wrong, like, I'm not a multi-million-dollar company, so what do I know? But it's like, maybe not bad at it, okay, that's too harsh. But what I mean is they could be capitalising on it better,
Yeah.
It's like the idea of, if they're going to rehash, old IPs, then, one of our mutual friends, who I won't name, but he'll know who he is when he's listening to this, has like stated in the past that when he's playing like Smash Brothers, he just wishes he knew like what characters or who the characters were in it, because you've got like the Ice Climbers, you've got Captain Falcon, you've got all of these characters like Ness from Earthbound, Game and Watch, like all of these characters that you, as you said, you legally cannot play unless you pay like hundreds of pounds for like some random guy halfway across the world to post it to you on eBay. It's like, no. I always remember playing the game Pokemon Colosseum. Absolutely loved it, but they brought out a sequel for it, and when I was younger, I don't know how I didn't hear about it, but I didn't get it. So at the time it probably would have been like, what, £30 to £50 maybe? Probably, because games used to be cheaper back then. I'm going to say it, games used to be far cheaper back then than your £60 rubbish, or 70 for your digital editions. Get off my lawn. And yeah, like, I remember looking on eBay and Amazon and things thinking, oh yeah, why don't I get a copy for myself? And it's like ridiculous prices. Like over like £100 or something. I'm like, I'm not paying like £150, £200. Like, add another 50 on and I could buy an Xbox S. I'm not buying like an old game just for that nostalgia boost. There's a line. There is definitely a nostalgia line where it's like, you will pay for certain, and it's like, maybe it's just me like being bitter about it, but it is like a kind of missed opportunity in that regard. Because this is kind of more of a cynical point about the good side of nostalgia, but it's definitely a good like promotion tool, especially for gaming companies nowadays. Because I mean, look at Nintendo, and I mean Sega do this as well, and I mean technically Xbox have been doing this. Have you noticed this? They've been kind of cashing in, saying, oh, do you remember the good days of Halo, or things like that, to be like they're kind of cashing in, and people will of course buy into it, because that was the characters that especially us grew up with. And it's definitely a good promotion tool.
Definitely. Part of me as well, like just thinking of like the kind of the benefit as well, and just what you're saying there of like, I was talking about introducing it to an audience as well. The historian in me is like, it's good to have a catalogue. It's good to have a catalogue of things that people can experience, and because at the end of the day, like, you do want to be able to experience, and one game that I've really always wanted to play, or at least try out, is one for the GameCube, which was that Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem, which was this really innovative horror game for its time. But like, that has never been released on anything other than the GameCube, and I don't think it ever will be. And like you're like, come on, Nintendo, like, you should be able to just release, like, I don't know who owns the rights now, but whoever owns the rights, like, you must be able to do like you don't even have to remaster it. You could just like surely just release it on whatever, like the Switch or whatever. Like Night Trap came out on the Switch. I'm pretty sure you could do like Eternal Darkness, But like, then day, like, as you say, like, it's such a hassle for me to try and find a copy of that game, and then also get a game. I never had a GameCube, so I had to get a GameCube console, and I don't know how much that would cost me and everything, So I do think it is important to have a living archive, and it doesn't mean you have to play it, but just the fact that it's there, I think it's just a good thing, to be honest.
Because I mean, a lot of gaming, well, I suppose it varies. You know that like where you've got the asterisks and it's like effects may vary, but
Yeah,
it's like depending on the company. Like the Xbox have started doing this with like their Game Pass catalog, where they're introducing quite a lot of old games. You know that you can
yeah.
go back and play. I think they're like really doing good in that regard.
Oh
Like
yeah,
making
Game
their
Pass.
consoles, backwards compatible and things. I think they are very strong, or they have like gotten off on a strong foot there.
Yeah,
Nintendo started all right because they brought out things, of course, like the Legend of Zelda games, Pokemon, things like that for like the 3DS and things on the Virtual Store and the Wii U store.
yeah.
Shout out to anyone who remembers that because I don't. And throwing a bit of shade there because I didn't own a Wii U. But yeah, like they started off well there and then they kind of just stopped. Like in terms of Pokemon, because obviously I know like that's my kind of bread and butter, but they did like the originals like Red, Blue, Yellow. Then they went on to Silver, Gold, and Crystal, and then they just stopped. And the weird thing is, people have been obviously they've been illegally, uploading ROMs and things for years,
Yeah.
and it's like there's no excuse for them not to be able to do this,
Yeah.
because the amount of money as well that they would cash in on the
Oh god,
nostalgia.
yeah.
And I mean, look at like even Banjo Kazooie, because I was thinking what you were saying there when you said about Eternal Darkness and like legal rights, because for Banjo Kazooie that was the same where Nintendo they didn't lose the rights, but I think they sold it on to Xbox, and they
Yeah.
really didn't capitalize on it a lot. But what they did was they brought out a thing called Rare Replay, and it's just basically a collection of all the old Rareware
Oh, I remember
classics.
that one.
So it's
Yeah.
like Banjo Kazooie, Banjo 2, Perfect Dark, Conker's Bad Fur Day, all of
Except
these.
GoldenEye was the GoldenEye was the
Except
one that was
Yeah, GoldenEye is
Nintendo kept firmly hold of that one, I think.
well, technically, did they not make a remake of GoldenEye?
Oh, they did, didn't they? Actually, yeah, put
Yeah.
Daniel Craig in it.
Oh Jesus, yeah. See, that's another thing though, because calling your game GoldenEye and then switching it with Daniel Craig, like they clearly knew what they were doing with that. I don't think there
Yeah.
was any call for, I don't think there's like a James Bond fan sitting there going, you know what I really wish? I wish that I could play GoldenEye, but with Daniel Craig. No offense to Daniel Craig, but I just mean like, there's clearly they've seen, the nostalgia around GoldenEye as a game and been like, yeah, we're gonna just make a very similar game or just an FPS, but just call it GoldenEye and be done with it.
I'm gonna
And
make a COD clone, and
yeah, did that game not bomb though, or was it?
it didn't do well. It
Oh.
didn't do well. I don't think.
That's a shame.
It certainly wasn't received well. Maybe it sold. I don't know actually how it sold, but
Yeah.
it wasn't received well.
Yeah, I remember people complaining about it, and that was it. But it's a shame having to kind of rely on that, which kind of brings us kind of neatly onto the bad side now of nostalgia. So we've kind of covered like a lot of really good points about the good side.
Yeah.
So yeah, oh god, here we go. I'm gonna let you start off with this. Like what? Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So there are definite dangers to it. I mean, as well, like it's funny actually. Like here's the educational. Well, not to say this is obviously Satsunami is always educational.
Oh, of
but here's
course.
the specific educational perspective. So nostalgia, the actual word nostalgia, is derived from two ancient Greek words. One is nostos, which means returning. Makes sense, but the other one's algos, which means suffering. So there is that. There is
Really?
that. Extent, yeah, there is that extent to
Wow.
nostalgia. That there is like a bit of a component of suffering
Mhm.
in there, and I think again we kind of talked about it. I think you can get so fixated, and you might be like, this is an amazing game. This is
Yeah.
like a formative experience of my life, and everything. And I will not hear anything said against this game. And it can make you close-minded.
Oh yeah.
I would say that as a negative. I think as well, the kind of trend of nostalgia can stifle creativity a bit. I do think it becomes. I mean, it's kind of the same thing that a lot of people complain about Hollywood, in that like companies bank on like remaking things, or just making sequels to established properties rather than like actually funding newer ideas. And I think the same can be said in gaming as well. I mean, and maybe financially it makes sense. It's more financially safe to make another Final Fantasy game than it is to invest in like a completely new IP and a new property and take that risk. So I think it can, and it's not just to like, obviously companies are responsible for that, but like as well, like us as consumers are as well. I think it's a kind of two-way. We're both at fault for that. Other thing I would say about it as well is I think not only do companies maybe not want to develop new games and take that risk, but I think as well, like us as people, we can be a bit more closed-minded to trying new games because we're like, oh well, I really like this game, and the nostalgia kicks in, and you're more likely to devote time to that. And part of that is also growing up, as we're talking about when we were kids, teenagers, you had more time to devote to these games. You had more time to like play games in general, so you could branch. Now, we are adults. We do have responsibilities. We do have less time, and you are kind of forced at a bit of a dilemma. You're like, do I want to devote time to a new game that possibly I won't like, or would I devote time to something that I know I like and go back to it? And I had that thing, I just said at the start of the episode, I really started playing Skyrim again. I have Red Dead Redemption 2 sitting in my on my backlog, and I was thinking, I was like, I should try this new game. I'm sure it's great. Like I've only heard good things about it for the most part. I'm sure it's a great game, but I was sitting there, I was like, oh, I do have limited time nowadays. Like, do I want to play this? And I was like, but I could just play Skyrim. I could just start Skyrim again. I know I'm going to love it. I'm going to love being back in that world. So I think as well, it can make you close mind. It can close your mind off to trying new things, and that does hurt, new developers and new ideas. So I would say those definitely are some of the bigger drawbacks of nostalgia.
I mean, it's going back to what we were saying earlier about the companies kind of making old, or rather bringing back like old properties. Like, as you said, bringing back the Sega Genesis, bringing back the SNES, as mini consoles or as Lego ones, whatever the hell that was all about. And, it's like, on the one hand, absolutely great. It's introducing that to like a newer generation of gamers. On the other hand, it's, again, I think I was talking to a mutual friend of ours who he has like openly said that he's not a big fan of remakes, and it is a very interesting point there. It's the fact that although you do have those games where they just remaster it, or they like put a coat of paint on it. Like, on the one hand you think, oh, that's great that they've updated the mechanics and things, which I do appreciate, but then on the other hand you think, well, instead of leaving us with those old memories and then coming back and doing something new, you're right, like there's nothing really creative there. Like, I mean, I'm not a game developer, like I'm gonna say that outright. I'm not like trying to trash any game developers or anything with a craft, because it's a really difficult thing to do. I can imagine it must be such a difficult process, but at the same time it must be so easy to be like, right, okay, what old game franchise we're going to pull out the hat today? Oh, Pac-Man, haven't seen that in a while. Or, oh, Space Invaders. It's a strange one. It's like an easy money maker. And I mean, I suppose that's why, like, again, with the Pokemon example, that's why they bring out like a lot of remakes of like their old games, and they kind of recycle that every so often, and a lot of games do it. I mean, in terms of like Call of Duty, I think I brought this up a couple of weeks ago, but that term, boots on the ground, that drives me up the wall. No, like, joke intended, but it was always like when guys or people online were saying, oh, Call of Duty's no longer a space shooter, it's got boots on the ground. That was supposed to kind of tug at your nostalgic heartstrings of, oh, did you hear that? We're going to be running now. And you're like, that's a cheap move. That is just so cheap to be like, oh yeah, boots on the ground means instantly it's going to be better than the last one. It's like, this will sound, this is going to sound terrible, but it's like, don't promise things like that. Like, actually speak through your actions, like make a good game. Don't like say, oh, we're going to do this and that, and kind of revert back to the good old days, because gaming's changed. Gaming has, and I mean, like, if you look at the landscape when we were growing up, FPSs were huge. Don't get me wrong, like all of these genres are. But FPSs were huge. Platformers as well in the 90s, they were massive. Then it went on to sandbox games in kind of the 2010s. And and now it's battle royale games, and it just all the genres just have to keep going and changing, and it's like a lot of them are trying to change, but at the same time keep that nostalgia. But I mean, a lot of games I think are failing. Like a lot of the big shooter games. Like again for COD, I don't know if Battlefield did this, but I know for COD especially, like now you go online and you can't get into a lobby without people with candy coloured guns, and it's like I don't remember that with Modern Warfare. Like you would have the gold guns and things, but you wouldn't have Skrillex scribbled into the side of the your AK or something. It's like, what is what is going on here? So it's kind of trying to have the best of both worlds, I think, with a lot of games. And I mean, look at one of the most infamous examples, Battlefront 2, where they tried heavily cashing in on the nostalgia and then tried to introduce loot boxes. And it's like, you can't have your cake and eat it too. That is just, and again, it goes back to that idea of, I wouldn't say a lack of innovation, but it almost feels like that.
Yeah.
But for the bigger companies anyway, obviously because indie companies are smaller, then you would probably see them more likely trying to do something more innovative, unless they're flat out trying to rob IPs off of people. Like, I remember going on to I think it was the Google Play Store. It was either that or iTunes or whatever, and it was a version of Fall Guys but with hippos.
Oh jeez.
It's just really surreal.
Flappy Birds. Flappy Bird syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. Oh god, there's a name I haven't heard in a while. But yeah, it was just going back to that idea of just cashing in on whatever's popular. And then, I mean, do you know what one I'm thinking of now, which is probably going to be a strange one? Remember Slender? The 8 pages. Remember how popular that used to be? And then everybody and their mother tried to copy that game.
Yeah.
And it just did not work, because it was the initial shock. I mean, same with Five Nights at Freddy's and Amnesia, because I always remember, it's weird, because did you ever play Amnesia before we played it?
No, I think I'd only ever watched, seen people play bits of it.
Yeah, because I feel as if we've both probably got second-hand nostalgia off of watching other people play it. Because I remember we eventually played it together, and we were going through this stage where we were both playing scary games and things, and we started playing it, and I think we got about an hour in and we were just so bored. We're just yeah, should we turn it off? Yeah, probably.
We didn't get to any of the good stuff.
No, we didn't at all. I think we saw one monster, and he just buggered off for a cup of tea, and you're like, yeah, this is
Jesus.
Yeah, and I suppose that's kind of the negative thing. It's that nostalgia building up, the hype. And then once you get into that, you're like, okay, just fair enough. Park yourself down here and just, tell me why you're so amazing, apparently. And it's
well, I think that's the thing with remakes. I think you can tell with a remake when there's actual love and respect has been put into it to craft it, compared to one that's actually quite soulless. And I think that's when we really there's nothing inherently wrong with, in my opinion, there's nothing inherently wrong with remaking a game.
Oh yeah.
As long as it's not just a soulless remake. I think of something I think the Contra series had a game recently, last year or 2019, I can't quite remember, which was just apparently just awful, and it was just you're just trying to cash in on the Contra name. Or something like Tony Hawk's, was it Pro Skater 5? It's not the one that came out recently, which was the remaster of Pro Skater 1 and 2, which was actually really good and I really enjoyed. And that was, you could tell that was kind of created with a bit of love and a bit of respect for the series. While something like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5 was just something it was literally there because Activision were about to lose the rights to the Tony Hawk franchise, so they quickly make a game so we can keep hold of it. And you're that's just at first I guess that wasn't a remake, but something like that with a franchise that people have a lot of nostalgia for. You're just pumping out something to try and keep hold of it, you know. And with the Star Wars Battlefront 2 as well, as much as like they probably did put effort into it as well, like it did feel soulless when it was like, oh, and here come the loot boxes, you know. It felt like a way just to like steal your money, basically, you know. It didn't have, well, it feels like, not that I've played it, and you know, maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like something like the Final Fantasy VII remake has been like done by people who actually care, you know what I mean, and like actually want to, like, you know, want to show their kind of love and their like adoration of the original. So like I think it does come down to that. If you do have like a soulless one, that's the real issue. You know, if you're gonna remake something, you know, again, like have a heart, giant
corporations,
corporations, you know, have a heart. Come on,
yeah.
But you know, it is that way of like put some care into it. You know, at the end of the day.
Do you think, though, that the longer a game series goes on, though, the more susceptible it is to being, like, worse purely because of nostalgia?
You know, it's actually a really interesting point, and I do think, going back to that idea of, like, you know, that suffering being a component of nostalgia, I do think if you have heavy nostalgia for something, you are more likely to suffer for it. As you say, as something goes on. We this is something we talked about when we did our kind of dive into the Halo series. And obviously, we both have like a good like maybe love's too strong, but like a great like of, you know, that original Halo trilogy, you know, 1 to 3, and then we talked about how our interest faded and how we kind of were disappointed or annoyed, you know, with like 4 and 5 and ODST and things like that. And as the series went on, like definitely the nostalgia, like my nostalgia for the Halo one could only sustain me so long with that franchise that, you know, like I didn't even buy it. I got given it as, I think my parents gave it to me as a Christmas present. You know, it wasn't something that I had to win because I was kind of done. I was checked out. And the same with the Call of Duty franchise. For a while, I was just checked out of that and just wasn't that. I would maybe pick them up, but, you know, secondhand and for cheap. Whereas before, I'd have got them on release date. You know, it is that way. Like, I do think I guess it depends. Perhaps your nostalgia can carry you through a franchise, no matter its ups and downs. But I certainly feel, for me, like it can only go so far. And I do think you are more prone to suffer because, again, as we said, I think maybe that's what maybe hit us most about the Total War. It would have been different if, like, the original Rome Total War was a game that perhaps we just were like, oh, that was fun, you know, but didn't have a great like for. Then when the series sort of changed, we might have been like, well, you know, it wouldn't have like hurt as much in a way, you know. Maybe too strong, but it wouldn't have been such a disappointment to us. But because we had such a love for like Rome and Medieval 2 and things like that, you know, it was a real disappointment when the franchise went in a different direction that, you know, kind of was like, oh, I just don't like this.
I mean, again, heartbreaking's probably too strong a word, but it's like
too hyperbolic.
You know, it's like sitting there like a Roman emperor, just like, oh, my game.
Betrayed me.
But it's like that kind of, I suppose, disappointment is like more an apt word of getting more disappointed. Because one of the examples, and I know it's like one I keep going back to, but in terms of like the Pokemon series especially, I remember there was like don't get me wrong, there's like corners they have cut which is not excusable, and that's like a whole episode in its own. I remember there was some things that people said where they're like, oh, it's too easy nowadays. And this is going to sound like a very old man thing to say, but sometimes I don't mind if a game's a little bit easier these days, because it's as you said, like, we've got, you know, the further and further we hurl into the abyss of adulthood and elderliness, you know, it's the idea that we don't have as much time as we used to in terms of like playing video games and things, and sometimes you just want to flick on a game, you know, have a casual romp around, but you get like all these, you know, younger spry gamers coming out the woodwork, you know, wanting a challenge, and that's perfectly fine if the game does have that, but there's like plenty of games out there as well, and I don't know, I think people, it's more the idea of when people use nostalgia to gatekeep, where they're like, oh, the older games were a lot harder, and it's like, yeah, the reason they were harder is because, you know, they were Game Boy games. I mean, they were lucky they fit the game onto the cartridge at all, never mind. You know, it's like a feat of engineering miracles. It's weird, it's like the apples and the oranges kind of analogy. It's like you can compare them as a series, but like objectively, you know, it's like the gaming landscape has changed, whether it's Pokemon, whether it's Call of Duty, you know, whether it's like even the Battlefront games as well, like, if you compare the two of them, they're just both two completely different games because they're both drawing inspiration from more like what's current, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not like when they made Battlefront 2, I did not get the idea that they were basing like their combat and things off of, you know, the original Battlefront 2.
Oh yeah.
Like, it's completely different. Same name and everything, which they clearly have done on purpose. Same name, but different mechanics. It actually reminds me, and it reminds me of a comic. It's one where it's a guy who has a favourite video game, and the video game's called Blue, and he goes to the cinema because he hears that they're doing like a film version of Blue, and then he goes there and he sits down, and as soon as the film starts, it just says the words blue, but instead of the screen being blue, it's bright red. And that's almost how I feel about a lot of like nostalgic properties in that regard. It's like same name and everything, but it's kind of weird. Like, have you ever noticed that there's a lot of nostalgic games that, although they're based off of other things, they just want to put their own spin on it? Like with GoldenEye, for example, they don't want it to be a clone of GoldenEye. They want it to be their version of GoldenEye.
Yeah, they want it to be a clone of COD.
Yeah, aye.
No, just to be facetious, but totally as well. Like, I suppose there is that thing as well. Like, if it is somebody, it is a new team who are looking at it as well. Like, you know, they probably will bring their own ideas to it, and maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, I don't think any game is perfect.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think. Well, I don't know. Maybe people disagree, but I can't think of any game that I played that I thought I can find no fault in this. You know, there's nothing, even like a slight imperfection. You know, so again, it's not bad to bring new ideas, but yeah, at the same time, it is about having that respect and that, you know, and that kind of care. Because, you know, I think if you're remaking something, there should be that at least. I mean, be realistic. Don't be like, this is perfect and nothing needs to change. You know, perhaps. But at the same time, like you should go into it with a bit of love for that series and be like, you know, I want to bring this back so people can experience it again.
Yeah, there has to be that kind of balance, though, doesn't there? There has to be that definitely. Kind of, like, a healthy dose of, you know, having those nostalgic elements that brought people in to begin with, but then at the same time having those elements of bringing something new and fresh, which I know probably sounds like that kid from The Simpsons, where he says he wants like a down-to-earth relatable story, but with killer robots. You know, it's a bit like that, whereas like, you know, we want nostalgia, but at the same time we want something new. And it's weird. I think you can do that though. I mean, games have done that where they've got the same character. I mean, look at Super Mario Odyssey. Like, same character, Mario, same from the 80s, and despite that, you know, despite Mario being like a 2D guy, jumping around from left to right, you know, he's transformed perfectly into the 3D world, and the nostalgia's there because it's Mario, you know, it's the character. Like, I don't think people play Mario to go, oh, I can't wait to go left and right. It's like, they're playing it to be Mario, as it were, and relive that kind of childhood. And
go through the Mushroom Kingdom and everything. You know,
exactly. And that's exactly what I think a lot of Nintendo especially, I think that's what they do, cash in on that when they're advertising, and they've got every right to, because that is what's going to draw people in. But it's just that kind of danger of making sure, because I mean, on the flip side as well, I think I don't know if you heard about that, they've released the 3-in-1 Mario game.
Oh, of course, yeah. For that,
which actually is, I think it's up this month. So basically, it's like they released it for 6 months, and now they're going to like take it back off shelves for some reason.
Bizarre decision.
I don't get it. It's something I'm just severely opposed to. I don't get why they did it, but, you know, again, not a multi-million pound company here, so but you know, there's that idea as well that they're purposely baiting people's nostalgia, and obviously they're not the only company to do it. I mean, EA have done it, Activision have done it, like with Assassin's Creed, you know. It is Activision with Assassin's Creed, isn't it?
No, it's Ubisoft.
Oh, Ubisoft, sorry. Ubisoft as well. I mean, Activision have done it.
Oh yeah,
hell of a lot. With Call of Duty, with Call of Duty as well. It's just like, there is a long list. Like, it sounds as if I'm singling out Nintendo, but I'm really not. Like, there are loads of companies, even Xbox and Sony do it as well. So Xbox, Microsoft and Sony, even they do it. And It is. It's just a danger. As we said, nothing wrong with doing it. Just make sure you're not doing it too much, I suppose.
Oh yeah,
But,
definitely agree.
So, yeah, just before we kind of wrap up, is there any kind of closing thoughts that you have on this?
Just to kind of reiterate what we've been saying, like there's nothing wrong with being nostalgic for something. Apparently, actually, video game nostalgia is one of the most powerful of all nostalgias
Really?
out there. I think
Yeah.
because I think a lot of it is to do with how we interact with games, and because we are so involved in playing a game, it engages so much of your brain and everything. You can get much stronger attachment to it than perhaps something like a film, where you're more kind of passively watching it. So there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong. Do be nostalgic and be like, don't be like, oh, it's good that you did to enjoy things and be like, I like this as a kid, and it's fine to have that. At the same time, I would say don't just be uncritically like nostalgic and be like to the detriment of accepting other opinions and sort of gatekeeping and driving people away. Be open and like I would encourage share your like your passions and what you liked as a kid and a teenager and why you liked it as well, like and why it's important. Share the things that are important to you.
Oh yeah.
But just be accepting that maybe not everybody will share that, and that's fine. At the end of the day. But yeah, like it is a good thing, but just be careful. Be careful with it as well. Don't let it become like something that makes you drives you away from people and everything. I would say.
Be more accepting. Yeah.
Be more accepting. That's a succinct way of saying what I just said.
No, it's absolutely true. As long as healthy doses of nostalgia. It's a good thing, but as the Greeks say, there's a lot of pain in returning, apparently. So
exactly.
So
but try new things as well.
Yeah, try new things, but don't forget what makes you happy. Essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, just before we wrap up, again, Adam, thank you so much for being the nostalgic co-host today and returning.
My pleasure. I feel all warm and fuzzy inside.
Oh, yes, especially 13 episodes on. I cannot believe that.
Goodness.
I know, it's racing. It's racing to the big 20. What are we going to do?
Oh my goodness, you'll have to do something special.
I know, that is true. As always, thank you all so much for listening to today's episode. If you want to find me elsewhere, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and of course Twitch, under the name Satsunami42. I think that's everything from me. Do you have anything else, Adam?
Just please keep listening and please keep supporting Satsu, because he's doing good work here. He's doing good work, and so your support is much appreciated.
Oh, thank you. And I've got like a mug as well for coins. They jangle when I shake it, so don't make me bring out the jangle mug.
It gets very annoying. It's easier to put the money in.
It's like, don't do it.
Don't do it.
Oh. So yeah, as always, stay safe, stay awesome, most importantly stay hydrated, and we will see you again next time. Bye guys.
Bye.